appreciate joining the Suprema webinar. My name is Michael Lee. I'm from Suprema. Currently, I'm doing the product management of BioStar 2. And today, I would like to introduce the new major version of BioStar 2, 2.8.0, and talk about cybersecurity. The contents, it's going to be talking about the cybersecurity. It's a brief introduction. I believe everyone will be aware what is cybersecurity, but I would like to share the point of view of Suprema, especially from BioStar 2, what we think is important on cybersecurity. Then I will introduce you to the new security features on BioStar 2, 2.8.0. You might have noticed, if you have been using BioStar 2 so far, you've been noticed that the major version has went up from 2.7.x to 2.8. When we first released the BioStar 2, we normally made one major version for half of a year, so 2 versions coming out every 6 months. And then we changed our strategy and tried to apply changes as fast as we can. So you have seen many major versions. So far, it has been the official version is 2.7.14. And that will be the last version that comes out with the major version 7. I'll also explain why this is the timing that we have increased the major number based on the fact what we have done so far. The next will be on the upcoming features. This will be also, as you may have noticed, will be related to security. And I believe you might have some questions, so I'll take a separate time to get your questions and answer them. If some questions are not clear to be answered right now, definitely we'll follow up and provide answers at once after this session within the days that we have mentioned before. All right, about cybersecurity, there's a lot of documents, contents on what is cybersecurity, but what we are focusing and what we are intend to focus is on the action of protecting unauthorized access, which can lead to be to have a theft on information or a batch of data. Also unauthorized modification and also destroying the data. But mostly what we're focusing on is preventing unauthorized access and retrieving information without any authority in a very illegal way. So this is one of the common topologies that we support. I mean, we suggest for the BioStar 2 system. So on the top, you'll be able to see the server with the database. The server communicates through TCP/IP, the Ethernet interface with the device. And some devices are connected to another device using the RS-45. Now from here, we can have 4 to 5 points that we can discuss on protection. The first will be on the database. So all the information is stored on the database. As you may know, the BioStar 2 supports the MariaDB and MS SQL so far. And that is the core of the data where it gets stored. The second part will be the medium where the data is actually transferred. So in this case, it will be from the device to server, it will be using TCP/IP. So this is a part where there is a part that we have to concentrate on providing security. The next will be the data stored on the device. So we provide 2 options as a distributed system where the devices are installed and has its own intelligence installed right on the door or other places that you need. Also, we provide a centralized system, but still the same thing is the data is stored inside the device. So this is one point that we have to consider security. The next will be another medium using the RS-45 on using OSDP as a master and slave concept. So mostly when we're talking here on 4 parts, the 2 of them are quite have been the same so far. So the TCP/IP and RS-45, we are using AES 256 and also 128 for the RS-45 to protect the communication tunnel. Today, it will be mostly focused, the new features will be focused on talking about how do we protect data that is stored on your database. Now, I would like to introduce the security features that has been added on BioStar 2, and these are actually just all that has been added to the 2.8.0. If you have been seeing the history of BioStar 2, you will be noticed that every release we try to put in as much as features for access control, time and attendance, and etc. But this time we just have added the feature for security. Now, I would like to explain where did this start. In access control, definitely the security, the physical security, but also in the logical security is also very important. But we have seen some holes in our system. And we won't say that there are like a very exposed security threat, but we did find a room where we should enhance our security. So where it started is when we talk about security with the BioStar 2 system, the device and the software, the main fact we normally emphasize is that the biometric template that we use for fingerprints and face cannot be reversed to actual real images. This is one of the points that we thought is quite enough for the security, even though it gets stolen by a malicious attacker, that they cannot do anything with the templates because it's your templates. It cannot be used in anywhere else. The next part is we mostly thought, so BioStar 2 is installed mostly, it can be an open network, but mostly it's closed. It has been strictly controlled of outbounds and inbounds. Some it's just intranet where it does not support any kind of outside internet connection. So if it's on premise, we can easily think if people really break in to an office or data center or any kind of site, at the beginning, we don't even think that's easy, but even though it happens, it's hard to find where it's actually located. But on the other hand, if you think, the system has to be secure that even though an attacker was able to take the database or a device from the system, from the site, it has to be impossible to reach any kind of information, including personal. So that's where we started, and that's where we're going, and that is one of the goals that we have set for the security, is to not allow easy attempts for stealing personal information, including also other sensitive information. This is a screen from BioStar 2. I'll show you lately. You will notice the security part, which was normally used for setting password complexity. But now we have moved some items to the security, and now we provide some items. These are the three main parts of what we provide. So the first is to provide an option to encrypt sensitive data on database. Second is to enable the secure communication with devices. And the third will be the hash key management. The secure communication with device was already there, but I believe was not a very welcomed feature due to the complexity, but also some sites were happy enough to just have the normal AES 256 encryption between the communication of server and device. But since we're talking security, I'll talk in a whole, and I will explain why you should use it. especially if you are included into an enterprise-sized project where the bars are quite high. Now, on the first line, when we talk about sensitive data, this is the definition of what we think sensitive data is. It's a data or combination of data considered as personal information and information that can be a security threat when leaked. So definitely personal information, it shouldn't be leaked. It should be stored safe in the database. The range of the personal data is as what I've written below, but it's also the combinations of them. So for example, if someone has been taking a picture using a Suprema device, but if their ID is there, that we can consider that as personal information because it shows who and when. Also, the mobile, email, PIN, definitely, even the ID, we think it can be used to identify a certain person when this data is out. So what we did is we categorize the items that could be considered as a personal information, not by just itself, but when it's combined with other data that's kind of vague to say it's personal information, then we all listed them up and we started to create a feature to encrypt them. Also, not just personal information, as if you have been using BioStar 2, you will know that we have a feature called Smart Card, which is writing data onto your card. So this is actually one of a way to protect your data because once you write your data on the card, it really doesn't need to be stored onto the device or even on the server. But there are configurations that are required to know where to write and how we should write it. That will be the location of where to start on the card, and also the access keys that will be needed to read and write data to the card. So if I start explaining encrypting sensitive data in database, you'll notice that actually this is not something that is a new fancy technology. I'm just explaining this to show how we are now taking seriously of any kind of information that can be a security threat or personal data leak. So if you come back to the topology, if we think what kind of data gets stored on the database, first it will be data coming from the device and getting stored to the database. This can be user information, but mostly it's about the logs that are generated from the device. If they're connected to the BioStar 2 server, they'll be automatically sent to the server and be stored on the database. And if you think of the logs, it does have some certain parts of personal information. As I said, it has a time, the location. It also has the information of who. In the system, if you place a card on the device, if the card is not recognized, the same card ID is used as a certain of a user ID on the logs to show which card was used. So this could be also personal information. Also, it could be data that has been actually generated directly from the server. So these types of the data are the ones that will be stored into the database. And it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to understand this. It's just from the server. When we store it in the database, we encrypt it. When we retrieve it from the database and display it or use it from the server, we decrypt it. It's not something fancy, but we think it's something that should be done. And if you're familiar with some part of engineering, you'll notice that just storing raw data right away is much faster than storing it after decrypting it or encrypting it or retrieving, then decrypt and then use it from the server. That is the price we have to pay. But we have applied a lot of ideas into the server, so it will be hard to recognize the difference, even though with a large number of data. So the next part will be talking about the secure communication with the device. Now I will come up with the topology again. If you see the communication between the server and device, it's 100% TCP/IP. But let's say there's an attacker, an actual physical attacker on the site, and they took one of the devices. Now this could be a problem because the device stores the data inside the device, but we don't have any restrictions of having that device connected to another server. So if just attacker access to BioStar, the Suprema website, download BioStar 2, retrieve the information from the device, and they'll get the data which was stored inside the device. Now, as I said, some information are not stored on the device. It's the server actually stores more, but still the names and key features such as cards and everything is stored in there. So if you retrieve the data from the stolen device, then definitely they'll be able to see what's going on. And this is where we thought, okay, so since they can't do anything with the template, it's probably okay with the biometric part, but still there's threats on cards, names, and IDs. Now, what the secure communication with device option provides is it uses TLS, and it generates, the server itself generates a certificate using TLS. And then when a device is connected, the first thing it does is it sends the certificate to the device. So if the device doesn't have a certificate already stored, it will receive it, continues to do the handshake, and then it will be using that TLS certificate for communication, which can be considered much more secure. So let's say, even in the same case, the attacker takes the device, connects it to the BioStar 2, but that doesn't happen because the attacker's BioStar 2 does not have the same certificate from the device. So the device itself will reject the communication, and it will not get connected unless there's a full factory reset done on the device. Some devices, it can be easily done. Some devices, if the administrator menu has been locked for the LCD screen, it's impossible to do. So there's two parts of here. It's good to know that it's really impossible to retrieve data if there's a TLS certificate already inside the device, but also it means you have to treat it very carefully, not to forget the password of the device if it has the LCD. So this is the part for secure communication with device. Mr. Gonzalo has asked a question, so I will just spare a little bit of time to answer. The encrypted and secure communication, it's only for the second generation devices. Well, the encryption part, it's only for the BioStar 2, so it depends. It depends that if you have just the correct version. So it means if you have the version 2.8.0, you would be able to use the encryption of sensitive data, and that is only for the database of BioStar 2. So it is not affected by the device type. However, the secure communication, it is only for the second generation devices, which means the old entry devices, BioEntry Plus, BioEntry W, BioLiteNet, XPass, XPass S2, does not support the secure communication. And that is a limitation. As you may know, those devices were developed years and years ago, and they do not have enough memory to follow up with all the new technology we're putting in. So unfortunately, we are just just restricting those devices, and starting from the BioStation 2 and to the latest XPass 2, and the upcoming devices will all support this feature. All right. Now the next will be the hash key management. This I will have to explain more than to show. So in the system, we use a hash key. So the hash key is one direction encryption, and it cannot be decrypted. So it's mostly used for encrypting pins, password that should not be revealed. Now, but using the hash key, it has to be shared among the devices and the server, because the reason is the BioStar 2 system provides the feature of uploading the users from the device, also transporting from devices to another servers, and even sending data from servers to servers. Whatever it is, the hash key, the PIN and password, you're normally not able to decrypt. So we have to share the same key for creating the hash value of the PIN. And that is the only way to compare the hash, a hashed value, and then see if the PIN is correct or not, if it matches or not. So it has to be shared. That is just the limitation that we have to go through. But the thing is, still, we thought we need to provide an option where we can have a separate hash key for a specific site. So I'll show you the actual live in a few minutes later. But if you change this key, it means if the device gets connected to the server, it will be using that hash key instead of the one that we actually share with the normal devices. I really hesitated if we should talk about this subject, but it's not something very secret. It's not a secret. It's a very common a limitation that is known. But I would like to let you know that we do have an option to provide this feature to keep a unique hash key for the devices that are connected to the specific server. This feature, you'll have to wait for a while. The reason is, well, even with the old firmware, we made it to work in a similar way, but to have it actually fully utilized, we've started to putting out new firmwares for devices. The whole process will be ended about early July. So from time to time, one by one, new firmwares will be out. Once the whole firmware lineup is released, and I will also do a seminar on this to explain not only the security, cybersecurity on BioStar 2, including the devices in a very deep way. So simply, these are the three new features. As I mentioned, it doesn't look big, and I agree that it's just something that should have been done already. But we have put in a lot of effort to make the migration very smoothly. Actually, this is a part that I realized that I should have put on before. But before I go next to the upcoming features, if you're using an existing BioStar 2, 2.7 or a version earlier, if you upgrade to 2.8, it doesn't mean that it will automatically encrypt the data. But if you install a new, if you install it on a new server, the version v 2.8.0, the default configuration will be encrypting the all data, as I mentioned before. The reason why we took this approach is that we do also understand that we have a lot of partners that has to read data from the database directly, and there is a business model using that kind of an integration level. So if we just encrypt it all the way, and if we don't provide any options to decrypt it as default, then it means those business models will be out for usage. So we didn't want that. So we are keeping it in the way for upgrades. but we are putting it as fully encrypted by default if it's a new installation. So please keep in mind if you have any kind of integration using the BioStar 2 database, that if you're upgrading, you shouldn't enable it, because it will you'll not be able to decrypt the data that we encrypted. But if you're not, if it's just a single usage, if you don't use any kind of integration, definitely we recommend that once you upgrade to the v2.8.0, we recommend that you enable this option. Now, this is just a small part, well, not a small part, but just a part of what we're trying to do. I would like to explain the upcoming features related to the security of the BioStar 2 system. As I mentioned, we're also doing a job on the device where it makes mostly impossible to, even if you hack through the device, it's not possible to get the data. So this will be finished in a month or two. You'll be able to know it. The next will be about the BioStar 2 key management. So as you notice, there's a lot of encryption going on here and there. And still, the BioStar 2 has to manage that key that actually is used for the encryption. For now, it's we think there's a room to enhance the security even on the key management. One workaround right now from version 2.8.0, you can store the encryption file into a USB hard drive. And if that hard drive is inserted to the server PC, the BioStar 2 will work in a correct way. But once it's removed, it will not be able to do the decryption or encryption, because the encryption, the key is inside the USB hard drive detached from the server PC. But not with that option, we're trying to even enhance the security of the key management directly when it's stored on the server PC. So this will also be dealt. Also, recently we have received a lot of inquiries about the Java that we're using for BioStar 2, since they have announced a new license policy, which means that you'll have to pay to use the very recent version of Oracle Java. So what we had to do is to revert to a version that is out of that license policy. The problem is, as time goes by, there are some vulnerabilities found in that version. So what we're planning is to do replace the Oracle Java to an open JDK environment, which means it's out of any kind of license policy, but it can also be upgraded as we release a new version of BioStar 2.8.0. Now, as that being said, I would like to give you a quick look on the new feature. So I prepared two systems. So this one is the 2.8.0, which you'll be able to receive it by next week. It will be officially released next week. For comparison, I have, for comparison, it's the same version, but I have turned off the option. So if you go to the settings, and you'll see the security, and you'll see a new set of options here. So you can see encrypt personal data on a database. It's on. You can also manage your own encryption key. So this encryption key will have effect on the actual key that is used for the database encryption. So if the BioStar 2 generates a very unique random key once you install BioStar 2, but if you want to have it in your own way, if you want to manage it by your own key, you can change it from here. This is the secure communication with device that I mentioned for the second part. If you click use, you'll have to go through a pop-up. You can use external certificates, the TLS certificates for it, but if you don't, the BioStar 2 will generate a self-signed certificate and use it to communicate with the devices. Now, as you can see, once you enable the secure communication with device, the device hash key management pops up. The reason is sending a hash key is sending a key through a certain medium. It's a very risky part. So we thought if the hash key has to be sent, it will be under using TLS. So once the secure communication is set, then we will have an option to send the hash key to the device. So these are the 3 easy ways to enable the options that I've mentioned. Right now, then I'll quickly show you how it's different. So as I mentioned, I have 2 sets of databases opened. So the first, this is just simple user information that I've retrieved from the user table. So you can see that there's my name, the name of the user, the emails, the phone numbers. The password is, although hashed already. This is not an option. The PIN and password should not appear on the database. But if you take a look on what we have done on the encrypted version, you'll see the user ID, the names, phone number, email is all encrypted. The only non-encrypted part is if it's a user group, but also if it's a administrator, which is always fixed as user ID. So we do not encrypt it, but we encrypt all information from here. So if I show you another part, this is the table for the logs. It's very complicated. Just one thing that you need to notice is that here the user ID column. So you'll see the actual user IDs here, which I've mentioned that this could be also combined with other information. It can be a very sensitive personal information. But if you see the encrypted version here, you'll be able to see the user ID is encrypted. So you will be not able to know which is which, even though they have intercept some logs directly from the database. Okay, so this is the main, sorry, just very simple. It's not complicated to enable. So as I said, if you're using some kind of an integration using the access from the database, I definitely recommend that you should turn off this option. If not, we hope you can enable it to protect the data of the your customer and sites. I will show you a quick, not the full process, but once you enable this, definitely there's going to be a migration process going on from the database. So that means the server will stop for a while and run a migration process. In this time, it's hard to give you a guide on how exactly it will take, because it will be different based on how much data you have on the database and on what's the performance of the server PC. But if I show you, if I apply, click apply, you'll see the main screen. If click the start button, then the migration process will start. So I don't think we will have to wait to see, just stand at the screen, stare at the screen to see it finished. As you can see, it's the progress bar is going up. So I would like to take this time to take some questions, but it's also finished already. Maybe because there's not much data there. But if it's a site that has been using a lot of information, it's going to take time. So it's hard to say right now, but actually we are doing this, we're planning to do the same migration onto the actual BioStar 2 we're using in the Suprema headquarters, which has around 25 million logs stocked up in the single database. The users, it's not that much, but we'll be able to give you numbers that will come to make you able to predict how long it will take for you based on the number of the logs. So now that's the end of the migration. You'll see everything is encrypted. So that's the whole part of the presentation I have prepared. Some comments that I made that was not on the presentation file, definitely I'll fill them up before handing it out to the attendees. Now I would like to take some questions that you might have been thinking about. So feel free to ask any questions. I'll be able to answer them. You can use the Q&A board or you can use the chat. It's all open. Well, while waiting, I do understand that many partners might have been thinking that there will be more features on not security, but on the access control or any other parts that you have been requesting for the past few months. But our decision was that we need to do this first. And so we need to have a base where we can guarantee that everything is safe. And then we should be able to start on the new features. So apologize for the partners that have been waiting for certain features, but I can promise that we'll be definitely working on those too. The question is that that Mr. Gonzalo is seeing a lot of requests for the occupation zone. There's a lot of names for that, but the core feature is to limit the number of persons that can be into a certain zone, a logical zone. But so what we think is definitely we can combine it with the APB, and then we can count the numbers on at a certain area, but it should not be included in the APB, because an APB zone can be one huge giant zone that includes several floors or sites. So definitely it has to be a separate one. So we're thinking of options of, should we just do it by globally, or should we have included in the device also so it can be managed even though it's offline. So we're going through the options and we'll try to apply them as soon as we can. Okay, so that will be for today. Once again, I really appreciate for joining, even though the time is not very suitable for many partners. If definitely, as I mentioned before, I'll reorganize some contents, add some comments, and then we'll share the whole contents of today's webinar. Once again, thank you very much, and I hope all is safe for you and your families, and hope you have a good day. Thank you.